Back with me now is Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for Reuters, and Jamil Jaffer, the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at George Mason University. Glad to have you both with me on this. It's curious, Jeff, because what does it say about this White House that Laura Loomer would have this level and type of influence?
Well, good question. I mean, it certainly says that she still has a line into Trump. I think it probably says more about that than it says specifically about the White House, because she's had trouble. I think she's complained publicly about not getting access to the new media seat in the briefing room, which tells me that there are some people in the White House around Trump who aren't wanting her to have the influence that she does, or not having the access that she apparently got this week. But she's obviously maintained an open line of some kind with the president and got to see him. And normally when he says something like, no, she didn't, or this person didn't influence his decision, we can probably read between the lines and assume that it's the opposite.
Well, the fact that it is the opposite and she did have this influence, I mean, the idea of an outsider, even somebody who had access to the president, having the ability to influence a firing decision of members of the National Security Council and staffers, that's almost beyond too many.
I mean, it's crazy. You think about who these people are. Maggie Doherty, over a decade with Marco Rubio in the Senate. She served for 2 years in the Trump administration at USUN with Nikki Haley. Brian Walsh, almost 2 decades at the Senate Intelligence Committee for Marco Rubio, other Republican senators, staff director for the Republicans at the Senate Intelligence Committee. And these are serious people, right? David Feit served for 4 years in the Trump administration at the State Department, including as a deputy assistant secretary in the first Trump admin. So these are hardcore, serious conservative Republicans. And Laura Loomer, a 9/11 truther and an Islamophobe, is coming to the White House and getting them fired. I mean, this is amateur hour.
Well, what does it say about Mike Waltz, though? Does he does not have a lot of power over who is his staff and whether they can retain their positions? I mean, is this because of Signalgate?
I mean, my understanding is Mike Waltz is in a somewhat precarious position right now. The president has supported him, has decided not to let him go because of the signal issue, but he definitely ruffled some feathers among senior leadership at the White House because of that, and that's kind of lowered his political capital a little bit. I don't want to draw a direct link between that and what happened with these firings, but I think it's fair to assume that he doesn't have as much say as he might have before the signal gate happened.
Not just the say, but I mean, how problematic is it that he doesn't have much power to an influence over his own staff and whether they can stay? I mean, that's pretty startling that in his position, he could not essentially save somebody if he didn't want them to go.
What's interesting is he might not even have known. You know how President Trump rolls. I mean, it's like Hunger Games in the White House, right? He hears from Laura Loomer, 5 minutes later people are fired. You don't even know what's happening, right? I mean, Don McGahn in the first Trump administration once famously said he didn't even know he'd been named White House counsel. He heard it from a press release.
One thing I'm going to add to that, though, is that the Trump 2.0 has been different in many ways from Trump 1.0 in that there hasn't been as much palace intrigue. And it seems to be creeping in.
Yeah.
So, they had this first couple months of executive order, executive order, executive order. They had it all planned out, and there weren't a whole bunch of leaks about what was going on behind the scenes. Now it seems like maybe some of those cracks are beginning to show.
What do you attribute to the lessened palace intrigue? Increased competence, familiarity with the structure, or greater loyalty within the ranks not to leak or share information?
I attribute it, at least in part, to Susie Wiles and an operation that's a little bit more disciplined. She's been a chief of staff with whom he's had more of a history, thanks to the campaign, than he had with Reince Priebus, for example, at the beginning of his last administration, and more experience. I mean, the people who've come in there, Stephen Miller, his other deputy chiefs of staff, they worked in the first administration. They knew exactly what they wanted to get done this time around, and they didn't want the distraction of the palace intrigue.
Well, the White House is saying, speaking of Signalgate, case closed in terms of an investigation. But then the Inspector General, the acting Inspector General for the Pentagon, says that he will review the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, and the use of Signal. Does that go anywhere, you think, that investigation?
Well, who knows? I mean, acting Inspector General, because, of course, they fired the real Inspector General, and they fired a bunch of them. So if it does start going somewhere and the president wants to maintain his team, he might fire another Inspector General. He just fired today, we're hearing just now, he fired the director of NSA and the deputy director of NSA in one shot. This is a 4-star general, right? I mean, this is unheard of type behavior in the national security community. You just don't see this kind of thing happening. And look, President Trump breaks a lot of rules. This is getting crazy.
Jeff Mason, Jamil Jaffer, thank you both.